Great to see everybody. So thank you for showing up today, everyone. Kaydee and I are honored and excited to take the next 45 to 50 minutes with you today, just to share our knowledge and experience on how to fuel yourself to run stronger, to run faster, to run farther, whatever your goal might be when it comes to performance and running. We are going to try to cover it off today. So all the while, staying focused on optimal health, which of course is so important. And we hope to leave about 10 to 15 minutes for questions at the end. So if you have any questions, save them, jump in at the end and feel free to ask. So I'm going to quickly just give an intro of myself, and then I'm going to pass it over to Kaydee so you can learn a little bit about who she is. As I said, I am in Vancouver, British Columbia. I am the founder of Eat2Run Sports Nutrition, which will turn 9 years old this September. And I'm really excited at this phase in my career in the business to be welcoming in other practitioners. Myself, I'm a nutrition coach, I'm a run coach, and I am a therapeutic coach most recently also. And as I transition more to working with athletes and individuals who really want to dig into what creates optimal health, I'm excited to have Kaydee join the fold to really focus on working with athletes on performance, the performance side of things. When I began running 20 years ago, at the tender age of 22, now you all know how old I am, I really, really badly wanted to perform well. And it wasn't until spring of 2012, so 10 years later, that I finally put it all together. That was the year I graduated from the Canadian School of Natural Nutrition, that I was finally able to run my 10th marathon where I performed well. I took over 25 minutes off my time. Many of you know this story already. And I finally qualified for Boston. And for the next 5-6 years, I focused on getting PRs, PBs, as we say here in Canada, in every other distance on the road. And then I transitioned into ultras, where I focused on getting performance in the 50K and the 50 miler. And I finally pocketed a sub 2400 miler. Today, my focus is really on finding peace and optimal health within the realms of mind and body and spirit and emotions, all within my continued running journey. Currently, as I train for a solo mountainous 100-miler this spring in the North Shore Mountains. So I'm going to pass it to Kaydee now to tell us a little bit about herself.
Thanks, Sarah. My name is Kaydee. I am, like Sarah said, a new addition to Eat2Run. I am really excited to be here. This is a new career path for me. I'm really excited to be working with Sarah too. It's just a real honor. So a little bit about me and my background. I am from Fort Worth, Texas. I went to TCU. My degree is in environmental science. And my previous career, before I decided to go down this holistic sports nutrition route, was in science education, and especially environmental education. So what led me to this point? So I have had some health issues in the past and really struggled with that. I had a pretty low quality of life. My running performance wasn't quite there yet, just didn't feel well all the time. And so I never got any answers for my root causes of what was making me feel pretty lousy. And so I decided to pursue a new route. And for me, that was deciding to go the holistic route. And as a runner, I found Sarah on Eat2Run. I became a client of hers, and she really helped me. She educated me, she inspired me, and that is why I decided to go back to school. And I worked really hard at Nutrition Therapy Institute, based here in Denver, Colorado. And I am a certified nutrition therapist master, and I graduated in April. Oh, I'm also an avid distance runner. I have completed 9 marathons, and I'm going to be towing the line at the Boston Marathon this October, which will be my 10th marathon. And it's just a moment I never thought was possible for me. So got a lot of exciting things going on, and I'm just really excited you guys are here and allowing Sarah and I to share some knowledge with you. And we get to talk about running and nutrition, 2 of the best things that I think exist in this world.
Absolutely. I would agree. Okay, we are going to dive into our slideshow for today. We are here to talk to you about performance. And so what we're really going to do is focus on long and hard runs, how you want to fuel your long and hard runs, as well as races. We're going to look at races specifically as well. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, what about easy runs? Maybe the majority of your training is easy runs. How am I supposed to fuel them? And so I just want to take a second and define an easy run. why are we not so concerned about fueling easy runs compared to hard and long? So an easy run is when you are running aerobically. What is aerobically? If you run with a heart rate monitor, it means take the number 180 minus your age. So I'm 42. That means 138. Anything below 138 is aerobic for me. That means I'm burning mostly fatty acids for fuel. I have unlimited stores of fatty acids for fuel. We all do on our bodies. And so therefore, I don't need to worry so much about taking in carbohydrates. However, when we are running hard, or when we're running long, because even when we're running aerobically, we are burning a certain percentage of carbohydrates that will run out because our carbohydrate stores are limited, quite limited actually. And so when we're running hard, we're running anaerobically. The only fuel source our body can use when we're running anaerobically is carbohydrates. And therefore you need to make sure that you've topped up your muscle glycogen stores and especially your liver glycogen stores with carbohydrates before you go for your run. That is the only way that you are going to see that optimal performance and have good energy and recover faster at the same time. I have long experienced with metabolic efficiency, thinking that I can work my way up to burning such a high percentage of fatty acids for fuel that I don't need. I can forego those carbohydrates for fuel. And I've learned that that just isn't true when it comes to hard and long runs. I can remember a memory I have when I really noticed carbohydrates were magic was about 6 or 7 years ago when I was creating my power cookie recipe. And I see some of my clients, past clients on the call. And so those of you who know this power cookie recipe, they're especially tasty when they come fresh out of the oven. And so I had just pulled them out of the oven and this was the recipe. And I had a 6-kilometer easy run on the schedule, 3.5 miles or so. And I couldn't resist eating 3 or 4 of them right fresh out of the oven. And an hour later, I rolled out the door for my run. I felt so good. I had so much energy that I ended up running for almost 20 kilometers, about 11 miles. And upon arrival home, I declared these power cookies were magic. And in fact, it just so happened that I managed to eat the right amount of carbohydrates for my body weight, as you're going to hear in just a moment. And that is magic when we eat the right amount of carbohydrates before going out, as you're going to hear in just a moment.
All right, so I am going to dive right in on how to fuel. As Sarah said, we define an easy run as less than about 60 minutes. So we don't really generally talk about fueling for those. I'm going to talk about fueling for these harder, high intensity, anaerobic, and long runs. So the timing of these is going to be 75 to 90 plus minutes. And an optimal time to begin fueling here is going to be 1 to 2 hours prior. Now, this is going to be different for racing, so we're going to get into that at the end when we talk about racing. But keep in mind, an optimal time to eat to prepare to fuel is going to be about 1 to 2 hours prior. So what do we reach for? We're going to be reaching for carbohydrate-rich foods, such as fruit. I like bananas. I like dates. And keep in mind, too, everybody's going to be individual for what works best for them. But again, you're going to be reaching for these high carbohydrate foods. Fruits, grains are a great option, quinoa, white rice, starchy vegetables, potatoes. What are some foods that we want to avoid generally in before these types of runs? They're going to be your high fiber, high fat, high protein. Not that these are bad foods, but these are foods that can be a little bit harder to digest and it could cause some potential stomach distress. So like your leafy greens, high fat, high protein, like you want to eat like a big red steak before, could cause some GI distress. A general guideline also to determining how much carbohydrate you need before these higher anaerobic and long runs are going to be 1 to 1.5 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight. So for me, I'm about 140 pounds. That calculates out to about 65 grams to about 100 grams prior to these hard anaerobic and long runs. So what are some great options for these pre-hard runs? Here are a few from our Eat2Run recipe book. We've got our honey almond energy bars, energy bites, and the oat bars. I've tried all of these. They are fantastic fuel sources. If you do take a look here, you have 10 grams of protein and 16 grams of fat, which tend to be a little bit higher. These are still great options to use, but since they are a little bit higher fat, higher protein, they may not be something you grab right before a run. Maybe try to incorporate those a little earlier rather than later. Here are some other options as well. I'm a huge sucker for the banana muffins. These are fantastic. They digest really well, and they give you some really great fuel. So Sarah said magic power cookies. I say magic banana muffins. I love these things. So.
Thank you, Kaydee. And yes, I have heard magic banana muffins many a time as well. Now we want to also not just focus on how many carbohydrates we need, how many calories we need. We want to focus on entering our activity, our hard and our long runs, and even our easy runs for that matter, hydrated, which is just meaning a state of water balance. And a 2017 study in the Journal of Athletic Training basically defines a good water balance as anything within 1% of being overhydrated and 3% of being dehydrated. The benefits of entering your workout well hydrated in this as close to perfect state of hydration as possible is that it will help you to maintain performance first and foremost, and we know this. It also helps in maximizing the transfer of metabolic heat. So in hot weather, staying hydrated is all the more important. It maintains our mood. I know I have found myself many a time in a hard workout or a long run or a race thinking, what am I doing out there, hating on life? And chances are I didn't eat enough calories or I'm dehydrated. And making sure that we enter exercise well hydrated helps to facilitate recovery afterwards. So you're doing yourself a favor by walking in well hydrated. Now, of course, the question becomes, how do I ensure I am well hydrated? What I end up seeing is many of my athletes come to me drinking too much. And it is because for many years, the advice has been drink as much as you can, drink as much as you can. And I really want to emphasize that that has changed in the past decade or so. And the advice, more or less now, not consistently across the board, there's still a lot of discussion on it. But generally speaking, what I find really works is tuning into your body, learning to listen to your body and drinking to thirst. So here you can see drinking to thirst is number one, the most important. If that's all you do, then I am happy. About 5 to 10 milliliters of fluid per kilogram, 2 to 4 hours prior, if you really want an equation to go with. If you do those calculations for yourself, you're going to see that's only about 1.5 cups to 2 cups. It's not a crazy amount. You don't want to be downing 1 liter or 2 liters of fluid just before you go out for your run. I'm sure some of you, I certainly have tried that. It just goes right through you. So small amounts regular throughout the day, drinking to thirst. If you really want to get into some different scientific ways to figure out if we're well hydrated, there's a 2016 study in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition, which measured void frequency. So how often do you urinate? Supposedly when we're well hydrated, we're urinating about the same number of times per day. And that time for most people is about 7, anywhere between 5 to 9, 7 being the average over a 24-hour period. The third useful indicator of hydration is the color of your urine. So we want to see a pale yellow color, not clear. So for many years, I actually thought I wanted to see clear urine, and that actually means we're overhydrated. And there's risks associated with that as well, as Kaydee will speak to in a moment. When we're reaching for something to hydrate ourselves with in those hours before we go for a hard or long run, one of my favorite options is, water's great, but why not utilize ergogenic aids at this point? So caffeine is the strongest legal ergogenic aid. And my personal favorite is a matcha green tea in the hours before I go out for a run. And my clients who are on the call will know this. I've recommended it to just about every single one. Because it not only contains the caffeine that is known to boost our performance, it also contains the amino acid L-theanine, which really helps with focus and concentration, not to mention those catechins, which are highly anti-inflammatory and actually help to deliver the caffeine in a more sustained manner of energy being released.
So we've talked about pre-run nutrition and hydration. So I'm going to touch base on hydration during. So Sarah talked a little bit about how a lot of people can overhydrate. That's a very common thing. And fluid loss in sweat is a very individual thing. It's dependent on a lot of different factors. I mean, your body mass is a factor, environmental conditions. Are you living in a hot, humid climate? Are you living at altitude like I am here in Denver, Colorado? And as Sarah just touched based on your initial hydration status. How hydrated are you coming into your run already? So as we know, when we are sweating, we're losing water, but we're also losing electrolytes, predominantly in the form of sodium. So remember that. The loss of body water and sodium levels in the bloodstream are going to be what trigger your thirst cues. Inappropriate intake of fluid can actually be very detrimental to your health and your performance. I have a personal story I'll share with you guys later about me doing that in a marathon. It's really bad. So beware of the risk of hyponatremia, which is going to be your low sodium levels in the blood. Now, according to medical literature, there have been no recorded or documented athletes dying of dehydration, but there have been some that have died of hyponatremia. So that is a really important thing to remember, not to discredit that dehydration is dangerous, but just keep in mind that over drinking, it can be pretty dangerous. Typical fluid losses, anywhere from between 0.5 to 1.9 liters per hour, again, are going to be dependent on the factors that I mentioned before. Athletes can lose up to 1,700 milligrams of sodium per hour. So when and how do we replenish these electrolytes? When we're going out for a run, during a run, do we need to replenish with electrolytes and water? So typically less than 45 minutes, you can forego water and electrolytes. If it's greater than 60 to 90 minutes, it's advised to replace with some electrolytes, such as Scratch, UCAN, a homemade electrolyte drink is fantastic. I can go to the next slide. So just some takeaways here. Don't force over drinking. It can be pretty dangerous. Just like Sarah said, make sure you're drinking plenty of fluid throughout the day to stay hydrated. Again, less than 45 minutes. Forgo the water and electrolytes if you want. 60 to 90 plus minutes, please supplement, and always listen to your body and your thirst cues.
Yes, I'm sure you are noticing a theme by now to listen to your body, listen to your thirst. What does your body need? So I would like to touch base on what do we want to reach for fuel-wise during the run. So when you're out for a hard run or you're out for a long run, we're going to talk about racing later, what should you be reaching for? So as you can see here on this slide, 10 minutes prior, I'm going to lump in 10 minutes prior with during. Because for some of us, especially when we wake up really early in the morning, you might have a hard workout where you know you're going to be in that anaerobic zone first thing in the morning. Waking up an hour to 2 hours before is probably impossible, might be impossible. And so therefore, I have athletes who do need to top up their liver glycogen stores just before they go out for that hard run. And so taking in some pure carbohydrates in those 10 minutes prior immediately spike the blood sugar level. They put some glucose right into the blood that's immediately usable for energy by the body. So it might be a gel, it might be a medjool date, it might be a banana. That's energy your body's going to use right away. This being the case during a hard workout, you might actually, if you haven't managed to fuel an hour, 2 hours before, you might even want to take some fuel with you. And this is a great chance to practice whatever you're going to be using on race day during a hard run. Because often we practice what we're using for race day during long, easy runs. It's a good idea to practice what you're going to be using on race day during hard runs as well, because you're going to be racing hard on race day. So like Kaydee said, 45 minutes or less when you're out there, really nothing or water to thirst unless it's a hard run and you haven't managed to fuel beforehand. And it's for those long runs, we need to focus on, okay, what are we going to fuel ourselves while we're out there for longer than 1.5 hours to 3+ hours. And this is where you've heard the standard advice, I'm sure, to take in 30 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per hour, or studies show that we can, if we train our guts well, we can take in up to 90 grams of carbohydrate per hour, but that is a lot. I haven't seen very many athletes able to take in that much, but it absolutely is possible. And I mean, it usually results in better performance. I want to say that as well. So as an example, a gel, 25 grams of carbohydrates every 30 to 45 minutes or so. If you're out on the trails, that would amount to as about 120 to 240 calories per hour. Really important to train your gut. You are out there training hard. You're training your legs hard. You're training yourself to be able to hit your paces that you want to hit on race day. You also want to train your gut. So we actually have some great studies now. There's a review, 2017 review in sports medicine confirms that there is a substantial body of evidence to suggest that the GI system is highly adaptable. So train your gut with exactly the fuel that you're going to be using on race day and utilize it in the exact same timing that you would use on race day. And we're going to look more at that in a few minutes.
So we've talked about pre-run nutrition during and post, or excuse me, during, before, during, and after. So now we're going to talk about post-run hydration. So when you come in from a run, you want to try to replenish those fluids and electrolytes immediately or within 45 minutes. So optimizing your intake of electrolytes, remember sodium is what we're predominantly going to be sweating out. So replacing that is a great idea. Post-run hydration plus refueling in the form of a recovery shake. These are what I highly recommend because you can actually rehydrate and also refuel. So you're getting your electrolytes back in, your carbs, and your protein. So what does refueling look like? Well, refueling looks like post-run, you really want to focus on your carbs plus protein. You want to be refueling sooner rather than later. And as runners, we know we rely on glucose as a primary fuel source. So when we go through a hard workout, high intensity anaerobic, or even a long run, if we're out there for a long period of time, we're going to be quickly depleting our glycogen stores. So we don't want to be in that state for a very long time. So consuming carbs is actually an excellent way to help aid in recovery and also to help repair your body. So when you are out there running, you're actually doing some stress on your body. You're initiating a stress response and you're actually damaging and breaking down your muscles. So this is called being in a catabolic state. So we don't want to be in this state for very long. So what you do is you can ingest some carbs because it will initiate an insulin response. Now by doing that insulin response, you're able to get glucose and protein into your muscles to get your body out of that catabolic state into an anabolic state, which means building up and repairing. So ultimately, the sooner rather than later you can get carbs and protein in, you're helping to rebuild and repair your body so that you come back stronger and faster and able to recover better. So what does timing and amount look like? So for easier runs, Sarah's going to touch base on this next. A nutrient-dense meal within the hour is key. But for your hard workouts, your anaerobic, your long runs, immediately is ideal. But the science does show that up to 2 hours is okay. You'll still get the benefits of it with a quick recovery shake or quick recovery snack. Now, how much? So the proper ratios you want to make sure you're getting is a 4-to-1 or 3-to-1 ratio of carbs to protein. So in grams, that's going to look like something between 45 to 100 grams of carbs plus the 15 to 25 grams of protein in that immediate recovery shake, which is, I like the recovery shake. Now, my favorite thing to do for a post run is have a cup of tart cherry juice, 2 scoops of collagen, and 1 to 2 of the magic power cookies. Because the tart cherry juice contains some compounds called anthocyanins, which are going to be anti-inflammatory. There's also evidence in the scientific literature that shows that tart cherry juice can actually enhance and improve your performance and your recovery. So I always go for tart cherry juice. You're replenishing those carbohydrates. Put a little sprinkle of sea salt in there if you would like to help with the electrolyte replenishment. 2 scoops of collagen to add that protein to help with the muscle repair and protein synthesis. And then 1 to 2 of those power cookies are a great option to top off the glycogen reserves, get a little more protein and a little bit of more healthy fats too in there.
Yes, yes. Awesome. Thank you, Kaydee. And there we go, post-run timing. So as important as that recovery shake is, and it really is important, as Kaydee described, why we want to get that nutrition into us as soon as possible. Studies generally say within 2 hours, but I always advise ASAP, and within 45 minutes is good. But then what do you do after the 2 hours or within the 2 to 4 hours after? Your recovery is not done with that shake, as amazing as getting recovery nutrition, whether it's a shake or tart cherry juice with some snacks is. Within 2 to 4 hours after we finish and we've had that shake, we want to make sure we're sitting down to a complete meal. And this is really important because it's going to provide our body all of those nutrient dense foods that I'm so passionate about, and many of you have heard me speak ad nauseum about in many times in the past. So leafy greens, this is the chance now that your body is not in stress mode, it's in rest and digest mode. You've had a couple hours since you finished your hard or long run. Get all the leafy greens into your body, 2 to 3 handfuls in whatever you're making. And on top of that, add in the veggies. Leafy greens and veggies are our most nutrient dense foods. This is where we're getting our vitamins and minerals and our over 40,000 phytonutrients. Now, on top of the leafy greens and the veggies, we also, of course, a complete meal. We want some sort of a source of a protein. I'm going to speak a little bit more to that in just a moment. Very important to continue with the anabolic state, continuing to build up our bodies stronger than they were before. And this is our chance to really get in a good serving of healthy fats. What that looks like for each individual, anywhere between 1 to 4 servings, depending on what your diet looks like. Carbs, optional at this point. If you're a low carb, high fat athlete, like I consider myself to be, you might actually omit them. But many of my clients actually do put some sort of a low glycemic carbohydrate into their recovery meal as well. So I've given you some examples over there in the corner, but I'm going to show you a few more examples in just a moment. When it comes to protein, so I want to talk a little bit more about protein. We really want to make sure that we are getting enough protein into us throughout the entire course of the day. So we know we have plenty of studies now to show us that whether it's through whole food alone or whole food plus some sort of a protein powder, it doesn't matter. I like to do whole food as much as possible. We need, as athletes, we're all athletes here, we need 1.2 to 1 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Do these calculations for yourself. For example, I need 77 grams to 150 grams of protein each day. And that, if I divide it by 4, so 3 meals plus a recovery shake, is about 20 to 29 grams of protein per meal, each one of those 4 meals that I'll be taking in. So you just want to make sure that when you're putting your meal together, you're paying attention to how much protein goes into it. So for some examples, I'm going to be sending you all these recipes plus a few more. This is my miso nut, a really close-up picture of my miso nut bowl, which is a complete meal. Burrito bowls, glory bowls, power bowls, all amazing sources of complete meals. Big salads, one of my favorite things to reach for, an easy way to get lots of healthy fats in there. With it might be millet burgers or veggie burgers, or these are bison burgers. A salmon salad, getting salmon into us, or ensuring that we're taking an algae omega-3 supplement is a really good idea to make sure we're getting our omega-3 fatty acids into us as runners. So important to pay attention to. Our kale salad, if we can get kale into us once or twice, at least a week. Kale is the most nutrient dense food out there. Or a vegetarian version, kale, quinoa, hummus tri-plate. I have a special affiliation for this meal, being the meal that I ate the night before my fastest half marathon ever. And I like to say those days are behind me, and my husband keeps saying, no, you've got more in you. So let's see. Post-run hydration, we want to, here we go again, drink to thirst. You want to make sure that you, for the rest of the day after that run, just keep drinking to thirst. So always have water with you and just keep reminding yourself, am I thirsty? Am I thirsty? Here's a calculation that you might wish to play with. Approximately 1.2 to 1 times the weight of fluid loss during exercise is what some studies say we want to replace. We want to make sure we drink afterwards. Personally, I have never bothered with this. This comes from when I taught sports nutrition. I've never actually done this calculation myself, nor have I found I need to, as long as I'm really tuned in to my thirst and listening to my body. Oh, where'd Katie go? There she is.
There I am. Sorry about that. So we've gone through the pre, post, and during, so pre, during, and post. So now I'm going to address specifically racing. So your nutrition before a race. We're going to be carb rich, low protein, low fat, avoiding high fiber, high fat foods like I mentioned before. And your carbs, something to remember, your carbs can come from your hydration, such as smoothies, fresh fruit juices, fruit smoothies. So carb loading is something that I know we as runners are all pretty familiar with. I think of the episode of The Office where Michael Scott is carb loading the fettuccine Alfredo before the 5K. That's not how you want to do it. So sometimes carb loading can get a bad rap, but if you do it correctly, it's scientifically proven to help increase your performance. So if your race is 90 to 120 minutes plus, this is when carb loading can really benefit you. Now, here's something really important to take away from. You do not want to consume more calories during this time, just more carbs to top off your glycogen reserves. So on race day, the last thing we want is to feel heavy. We don't want to feel fatigued, sluggish. So that can happen when you're consuming more calories on top of more carbohydrates. So that's just something to take into account. You just want to be trying to saturate your meals and your snacks with more carb-rich foods around this time. Replenish your carbs after every run, both easy and hard. Your carb loading days, you want to try to avoid fried foods, dairy, or red meat. These are just going to be harder to digest, and you don't want to even try to have any type of GI distress on race day. So a typical carb load for a marathon is going to be 3 days. For a half marathon, it's going to be a 1-day carb load. Now, some breakfast suggestions here. I really look forward to carb loading during my training cycle because although all of these recipes are good, the banana oat pancakes with berries with all the maple syrup is just to die for. I really look forward to this. So as you can see, it's carbs on top of carbs on top of carbs. So this obviously carb loading, this is the time to really load up on these type of foods for breakfast. So what about snack options? So here are a few snack options from the Eat2Run recipe book, and dried fruit and fresh fruit included. So I have tried all of these as well. The top 3 here are probably my favorite. A tip for these, if you have a destination race, I like to make these in batches before I go and put them in Tupperware, carry them with you on the plane, have them with you in your hotel room so that you are eating food that you have made, you know what ingredients are in there, you know what your stomach can handle because you've been practicing in your training, and you are able to continue your carb loading cycle with these healthy snacks. Lunches and dinners, carb loading, again, low fat, low protein, low fiber. Typically, some people like to go more vegetarian in this time because of the higher carbohydrate, lower protein cycle if you're not already a vegetarian. Some good bases during this time are going to be quinoa, potatoes, starchy veggies, white rice. Rice pasta is my personal favorite. Some things to avoid the day before are going to be your leafy greens, salads. Those can cause some GI distress. If you are wanting to get some greens into you, opt for some green juices. You'll still get some of the nutrients, but also less fiber. Eating dinner sooner rather than later the night before the race is a really good idea to ensure that your food from the night before is fully digested. This is just an example carb loading day that I do before my marathons. As you can see, some of these are tailored to my personal needs, my macros, but just to let you know, just to point out, this is how you can saturate your meals and your snacks with more carbohydrate-rich foods without upping your calories. So this is an actual carb loading day that I did before my fastest marathon. So I'm gonna go over to Sarah she's gonna teach you how to calculate macros for your carb loading days and pre-race fueling as well.
Yes, thank you, Kaydee. So here comes the fun part for some and not so fun part for others, those who don't like math at all. This is really important to do the calculations because every single athlete that I've ever done these calculations for looks at it and kind of balks at how many carbohydrates are there, what that looks like. But I promise you, it works every time if we can dial in on the right foods to make it work for you, given your digestive system. It works really, really well every time. I'm always amazed. I've followed this myself, just like Kaydee, time and time again, and it amazes me every time. So 1 to 3 days prior to your race in carb loading, here's the calculations for you. You want to consume 7 to 10 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight per day. So for example, 138 pounds, which clearly that was my weight back when I did this example. 138 divided by 2.2 is 63 kilograms. So once you've got how many kilograms you weigh, take that, 63 kilograms times 7 grams, the lower end, 63 kilograms times, or whatever your kilograms are, times 10 gives you the higher end. So for myself, this would be needing to consume between 440 grams and 630 grams of carbohydrate each one of my carb loading days. This is not something I'm going to do any other time of the year. This is only for carb loading days. And we also want to pay attention to what we're going to do the morning of. Really, really important to make sure we go in with fully topped up muscle glycogen stores and fully topped up liver glycogen stores. Our liver depletes by 50% just by sleeping. So we definitely need to make sure we're getting enough in the morning of. For the half marathon distance, you can get away with 1 to 3 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight. For a full marathon or an ultra, you want to be reaching for 2 to 4 grams per kilogram of body weight. So for an example here, 63 kilograms again, times 2 equals 126. 63 kilograms times 4 grams equals 252. I am aiming for 126 grams to 252 grams of carbohydrate on race morning. Let's look at what that looks like in practice. So this looks familiar. Kaydee just showed you what she has been using. This is an example carb loading day. As again, you can see the banana oat pancakes fall in here. It's definitely one of my favorites. Oatmeal, banana oat pancakes, 57 grams of carbohydrate. That is a good load of carbohydrates right off the bat. And here's where I'll say, yep, add all the maple syrup. You've got healthy fats and proteins in the banana oat pancakes to help bring the glycemic load down. And throw in some juices. So this is also the time where I'm going to say, yep, go ahead and drink your carbohydrate calories. If you try to eat them all, you're going to end up feeling heavy and too full. We need to get rid of some of that fiber by adding drinkable carbohydrates into your carb loading days. I'll let you quickly scan over the rest of the snacks and the meals, but you can see here reaching for smoothies is a great option. There are some smoothie bars that make some really great, very, very high carb smoothies. If anybody knows Body Energy Club here in Vancouver, all of their smoothies are between, I think, 70 to 100 grams of carbohydrates. So save those for carb loading days. Rice-based meals is my personal favorite. And dinner becomes very, very simple. So I will go out, if I'm traveling, I'll go to a restaurant and I will ask them for just plain white rice with maybe a bit of a sauce, non-fat sauce, and some simple veggies. If I'm home, I'm making myself beets. Beets are an ergogenic aid. So really, really simple the night before. And then having a snack, eat often, every 2 to 3 hours. Again, another example now of what breakfast might look like on race morning. So here you can see the target, 126 to 252. And I just want to go back for a moment. All of this food here, and I'm sure you'll agree that it looks like a lot of food. That's only on the lower end of my target, 498 grams, which has always worked just fine for me. And I do find with all my athletes, hitting the lower end of the target does seem to work just fine. So to note that. So here, starting with some fully loaded oatmeal, I have noticed time and again, this has happened many times with my athletes, instant oatmeal tends to work best. I've had some try old-fashioned oatmeal or steel-cut oatmeal, and it just does not digest well in time. So instant oatmeal here, maple syrup, banana, dried fruit, bringing in all the carbohydrates again, and starting 3 hours before race. This is where I don't care what time your race is starting, unless you are doing an ultra marathon where you're going to be up for 24 hours and it starts at 6 a.m. Okay, I'll give you a pass there. But almost any other time, I highly suggest waking up. I've woken up at 2:30 a.m. in the morning to make sure I get all my carbohydrates into me. And it has been worth it 100% every time. And then here, of course, you see race day utilizing both caffeine as an ergogenic aid as well as some sort of carbohydrate, in this case, a date, just before I start racing.
Alrighty, so we have gotten all carb loaded. We are ready to race. So now I'm gonna speak to specifically half and full marathon road racing and how to fuel during these. And I just have to go off of what Sarah said in terms of the carb loading. It does look like a lot of food when you're not used to it, but it pays off so much. So absolutely key on those carb loading days. So during the half and full marathon road racing, you want to aim to get 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour. This is going to be also dependent on the pace that you're going, your distance, and your replenishment rate. So for me, I gel every 30 to 45 minutes with water. The water is important to have a sip. It'll aid in the digestion of your gel. And again, do not overhydrate. This is where I'm going to briefly share my story about overhydrating in a marathon one time. I was working with a nutrition professional. It was not Sarah. And, I did the sweat test, went on a long run, calculated, weigh yourself naked before you run, go on your run, weigh after. I lost 7 pounds of fluid. And so according to those calculations, I needed to fuel quite a bit throughout the course of 26.2 miles, right? So according to the calculations, I did not want to get dehydrated. And so I drank 1 to 2 little cups at every water station throughout the entire race. And I felt so terrible. I was really bloated. My pace slowed down. I felt it just really hindered my performance and I felt terrible. So, that's a good example too of, we listen to the science, we have these calculations that are super important, but it's also really important to listen to your body. I was not drinking to thirst. I was overhydrated and it really impacted my performance that day. So just wanted a little life lesson there. Caffeine, as Sarah has talked about, caffeine is an ergogenic aid, which is a performance enhancer. It can be used before and during your race. So if you implement this in 60 to 90 minutes prior, it can actually really help your performance. So according to the latest science, I got this article from 2018, 3 to 6 milligrams per kilograms of body weight in caffeine is for optimal performance. You can also, literature also says a little bit earlier, you can go on the lower end of 1 to 3 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. I think you've got to be careful here. If you are sensitive to caffeine, I would tend to maybe go on the lower end. I don't see a need to go up to 6 milligrams, but again, individual, listen to your body. And of course, you're going to be practicing this in your training. So this is an example of my pre-race. The morning of my past 3 marathons, I have followed this exactly to a T. Again, this is my individual calculations here. And again, if you want to work with me, I can do this for you as well. But as Sarah said before, waking up 3 hours prior is key. You want to make sure you get that meal in 3 hours prior, regardless of what time it is. It's really crucial to ensure that your food is digested. You're going to be out on the race course racing hard, high intensity, adrenaline going. You want to make sure you are fully digested. And again, here I use a caffeine pill as an ergogenic aid for me personally before my race. Now, this is for my last road marathon. This is how I fueled with particular gels. As you can see here, I alternated between caffeinated gels and non-caffeinated gels. So this is a perfect example of using caffeine during your race to enhance your performance. It actually really, really helped me. My anticipated finish time here was 3:25 and I came in at 3:21. I also implemented this same fueling for my half marathon 2 months prior, and I also PR'd here too. So there is something to proper fueling, coming in properly, carb loading, and using caffeine as an ergogenic aid to really enhance your performance.
Yes, there is. And I have never actually recommended an athlete taking 4 gels for a half marathon, but because Kaydee was doing that for training for her full marathon, I was like, yep, go for it. And what was your actual time that you came in with, Kaydee?
1:33.
1:33, which was a PB for you, right? Or PR?
It was. And I still had gas in the tank. I mean, I was fully carb. It was just awesome.
Could have kept going. So while I usually recommend 1 to 2 gels during a half marathon, I mean, it just goes to show how fueling during the race really can make all the difference in the world. So I want to turn away from a road a little bit into the trails that I've been for the past 5-6 years and look at maybe how we want to fuel a little bit differently when it comes to trail running. So I'm going to touch on hydration and also calories. So again, if there's one thing you're going to walk away with today, it's going to be that you want to drink to thirst all the time, right? So again, when you're out there on the trails, you want to drink to thirst. And what does that look like? We want to set out with a certain amount in our hydration pack already. So we can start with calculations. And this is how I work with athletes is we start with the calculations and we use them as a base. And then we really tune into your body. What is your body saying? Is it too much? Is it not enough? And we will make adaptations from there or adapt from there. So 400 milliliters to 800 milliliters, very generally, we can shoot for that, have that with us, but always remembering drinking to thirst. Now, we do need to make sure we're replacing sodium. If you're out there for longer than 2-3 hours, you really, especially if it's a hot day, we want to make sure that we're replacing sodium while we're out there. If you're out there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, you might lose a lot of sodium in your sweat, but you're going to be done and you can get sodium back into you as soon as you're done. So you don't have to worry so much about taking sodium in during when it's 1.5, 2 hours or less. But if you're out there for hours and hours and hours, you want to make sure that you're taking in a minimum of 300 milligrams of sodium per 500 milliliters of fluid. If you are utilizing a good sports nutrition drink, so here Scratch is my favorite that I've recommended for years. Their packaging has changed multiple times and I'm still recommending it. The most natural, still to this day, the most natural sports nutrition drink that I have found out on the market. Tailwind, there's a few others that come in close behind. Some athletes, I'll just stay here, like to drink their carbohydrates. And so maybe that might be an option you want to play with if you find that food or gels are just intolerable. So Scratch just recently came out with a high carbohydrate drink. Martin has had this around for quite a number of years now. 2 of the more natural ones, simpler ones on the market. I want to go back to this for just a moment. Once you've taken care of ensuring that you're getting your hydration needs met, we want to make sure that you're getting enough calories while you're out there. Again, if you're out there longer than 2 to 3 hours, we really need to focus on ensuring that your glycogen stores stay topped up so you don't dig a deep hole and go into too deep of a stress mode for the body. So when we're on the trails, most of the time, runners are not going to just be using gels or pure carbohydrate-based foods. I was running the Squamish 50 miler a couple of years ago. It was a number of years ago now. And I chatted with a runner early on in the race, and we were talking nutrition, as I often do with other racers. And he mentioned to me that he, for fuel, was using 15 vanilla goo gels. That is not common for trail racing, but apparently it can work. I actually know the winner of Ironman Canada about a decade ago. She used, again, it was 12 or 13 vanilla goo gels. There must be something about that gel. The majority of trail runners and the majority of my clients that I work with for longer distances utilize real whole foods. And this is what I do suggest. So between anywhere from 100 to 400 calories, I always start my athletes with about 150 to 200 calories per hour and adjust from there. So what does that look like in practice? These are the more the road running, the carb based, but trail runners still want to bring these with them because as the digestive system shuts down, and it will if we're racing hard or if it's really hot, our body eventually won't want to and won't be able to digest the real food. And this is where we're going to have to default to the easier to digest fuel sources. So these are some of my favorite gels and chews, as well as real whole food sources. We can make our own. I actually ran pigtails. I managed to make it 120 miles and it was a pigtails 200 miler I was attempting. So 120 miles, and I went in with the sole purpose of, not the sole purpose, but one of my goals was to use only food that I had made myself, no packaged stuff. And so I made power cookies and I made energy bars and I had wraps with me, sandwiches. I ate pie out there from the aid stations and it was a blast. So we can bring whole real foods that we've made, or what most of my athletes do. These are some of the favorite, more natural options. So I do a lot of trail running, long trail running, backcountry camping, hikes, and the Hornby bars and the bison bars for me are my personal preference. But there are many, many different options, just making sure the ingredients are as natural as possible. There's some gels out there that are really whole food gels. So a lot on the market, I don't even think I've come across all of them yet, but there's some great items out on the market. One thing that I do want to note, the last thing that I'll note here with trails, is when we're out there running for long distances, rotate between sweet and savory. If we start with sweet and just stay with sweet, we're gonna get sick of it within a few hours. If you're out there 4, 5, 6, 12 hours, you're gonna want to stop eating. So about every 30 to 40 minutes, something sweet, and then 40 minutes later, something savory. Savory being maybe the plantain chips, pretzels, sandwiches, even chips, things like that. To give you an example, so actually a year ago, I had a client doing a 50 miler, target 12 hours. She was able to consume about 200 to 300 calories per hour, practiced every single long run. She practiced, watch was set for every 30 minutes. So I knew that she could take it in as long as it wasn't too hot and her digestive system would shut down. So we did all the calculations in advance, and this is what it looked like: 3,682 calories that she would consume over the course of 12 hours. Now, as it turns out, she did not consume all this food. Why? Because she did so well. She ended up finishing that race in 9 hours and 48 minutes. So of course there was some calories left over at the end, but getting the majority of this food into her really helped her to stay high energy the entire race. She finished really, really strong. And I have many stories like that.
Right. Thanks, Sarah, for talking about the trails and ultras. That's a little out of my realm, so thank you for that. I'm going to do a quick summary. Oh, and here we go. So just to summarize quickly some of the points that we've made throughout our presentation tonight. So again, easy pace, aerobic, less than 60 minutes, no fueling is necessary. Before those anaerobic hard runs and your long runs, eat 1 to 2 hours before. Carb-rich foods, avoid those foods that you know are going to maybe cause some GI distress. Pre-run hydration, go in a state of you hydrated, meaning you're fully hydrated. Remember, drink to thirst. You can measure your hydration by simply looking at the color of your urine as well. You want to aim for it to be like a light lemonade color. During your run hydration, forego it, less than 45 minutes, 60 to 75 minutes plus. Have a replacement for electrolytes on you. During nutrition, use the same fueling plan you're going to use on race day. Super, super, super important. You want to train your GI tract to be able to handle that load, what you're putting in, and also the goos or gels or whatever food you're choosing to race with. Now, less than 45 minutes, nothing, maybe take water if you want. 1.5 hour to 3 hour, again, the 360 grams of carbohydrates per hour is key. If you're doing real food, 100 to 400 calories per hour every 30 to 45 minutes. Post-run hydration, again, listen to your thirst cues. I highly recommend the anti-inflammatory recovery shakes that are the tart cherry juice. But again, it's making sure you're getting in that, replenishing your fluids and your electrolytes. Post-run nutrition, remember, ASAP or within 2 hours, aim to get carb-rich and protein. Salt your food to taste as well to replace any electrolytes lost. Within 2 to 4 hours, make sure you get that nutrient-dense meal with those leafy greens balanced with healthy fats, protein, and maybe carbs if you would like. On race day, nothing new on race day. Before, again, carb-rich. Carb loading is going to be 1 to 3 days depending on your distance. And remember to consume more carbs, not calories. During your race, the magic number, 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour. Remember, you can use caffeine if you are not sensitive to it as an ergogenic aid to optimize your performance. 3 to 6 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram of body weight, 60 to 90 minutes prior and during. Fueling with gel, 25 grams of carbs every 30 to 45 minutes with water, or with real food, 150 to 200 calories every 30 to 45 minutes. And again, we want you to really listen to your body. That's one thing you take away from this is we are all individual. We're biochemically individual. We require different things. So really tone in onto and listen to your body, and definitely listen to your thirst cues. So thank you so much for coming to our presentation. I am really excited to be part of Eat2Run. This journey of mine, figuring out my health problems and learning how to properly fuel for racing and optimal wellness and health has just changed my life. And so I'm really excited to begin my new career journey here. So thank you guys for coming, and we're going to open up the floor here for any questions.
Yes, absolutely. So if anyone has any further questions or is interested in working with Kaydee on performance for racing, or even just to fuel your long or hard runs, please don't hesitate to send her an email and inquire. But we are here for the next 5 minutes or so. I know then people might have to go, but I'm willing to even stay a few more minutes. Does anyone have any questions? I think that we actually have not too many people. So if you have a question, feel free just to unmute yourself and jump in.
There is a question that's come up in the chat box, and it says, what if you don't consume caffeine? Is it okay to still use caffeine only during training and racing?
That's a really good question. Thank you, Tanya. So I actually quit caffeine, or I should say I quit coffee years and years and years ago. But I do know that because I'm so sensitive to caffeine, which means it's a bad thing for me to consume on a regular basis, it disrupts my hormones. It is something that really works for me as a performance aid. So I will practice with it and make sure that it works okay for me during hard runs and during long runs. And once I've done that just a few times, I'll know I'm okay to use it for race day. So you might want to experiment with it. Even if you don't normally use caffeine, you might want to experiment with it, because it could end up being just an amazing ergogenic aid for you. However, if you experiment with it and it doesn't work, then that's okay. There are other ergogenic aids.
And I think just to jump in on that, I think Heather Benz is the one that asked that question. So when you are looking at the slides in the 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, I would go with the 1 to 3, go on the lower end when you're trying that out. Definitely just don't jump into the 3 to 6 just because it was said there as the latest research.
Absolutely, yes. Any other questions? Anyone have any questions? We love questions. All right, well, 5:29. Wow, we are right on time. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today. Amazing to see. I love all the familiar faces and names that I'm seeing. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And I look forward to introducing you to more nutritionists coming in under the Eat2Run umbrella. So lots of exciting things happening here. Stay tuned. And if you are pursuing performance, then please don't hesitate to send Kaydee an email. I'm here also as well. Thank you so much, everyone. Please feel free to unmute yourself and say goodbye, good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kaydee.
Thank you so
Bye.
much. You guys are awesome.
Thank
Thank you.
Thank you.